Dan,
Yeah, I'm here.
okay, Wanda, Joe,
Here. Okay, at this time, would anybody care to abstain for financial or non-financial conflict of interest?
I do not.
No,
I have none. Okay. With that, any additions or corrections to the agenda? If there's none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve the agenda as is.
I would second that motion.
Motion and a second, further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. It is now time for public comment. Would anybody in the audience care to make a public comment at this time? Hearing and seeing none, public comment is closed. We will move on to item 5, primary election canvass.
you have the report of each office. Excuse me. With the totals from each vote center and the totals for each candidate.
Do you want to go through it or do you want me? We just need to approve it.
If you want to.
I don't think we have to go through it.
This is made available to anybody who stops up at the auditor's office. Is it
Correct.
not? Well, then I would think we wouldn't have to go through it candidate by candidate, center by center.
I'd move approval of the report.
I second.
Motion and a second to approve. Further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Item 6, ambulance transportation agreement. Come on up, Steve.
Hello, everybody. Earlier last year, patients have been flown in by medical fixed wings from the middle of the state into HSC, which requires them to land it at Changurney, and then they want us to go and pick those patients up and take them across the street to HSC. These patients are medically cleared. HSC will not accept anybody that's not medically cleared. We are, these calls are becoming a pretty significant disruption to our 911 and emergency services. They call with very short ETAs. It's delaying us from I shouldn't say delaying, it's slowing down response to emergency calls. Just this last week, we had a situation where we had to leave a flight team on the tarmac that was going to get a patient from Sacred Heart to get a patient across the street because they already were loaded at the time we got the call. Anyhow, this whole thing we get about $150 in from insurance for this. Many times we have to call in off-duty crews, so we're paying overtime. So we're not even really getting close to covering our costs for these little trips from Changurney to across the street. We're not obligated by any statute to do those. They just do them, and I'm not sure what happened a year ago that created this situation where they're flying these patients into HSC, but I want to set up a transport agreement with those flight services that we're charging them a flat rate to go pick them up, take them across the street. We don't, at that point, we won't have to use a full crew. We only use one person, just a driver. One thing I forgot to mention, that these patients are literally walking off of the aircraft. Flight team is walking off and climbing in the back of our ambulance and seat belting, and we close the door and drive across the street. Okay, so there's not, most situations are, these transports are to HSC or to mental health places are covered by just a ground transport, such as the Sheriff's Department. We don't go to Lewis and Clark Behavioral Health, or we don't go to Sacred Heart to pick up mentally ill individuals and take them to HSC because they have to be medically cleared. They're usually covered by either law enforcement or by Lewis and Clark staff. So that's my spill. I like to get those individuals to sign that agreement that I provided to you so that we're charging them a flat rate.
So what are you paid now?
About $150.
So it's gonna be $450?
Yes, I chose that because we have a transport agreement with Sacred Heart to move patients from Lewis and Clark Behavioral Health, or excuse me, Fox Run campus to Sacred Heart. And I didn't think it was fair to give
No, I was just asking.
somebody a better rate than that.
Right. Why are they calling you, not sheriff or?
I could
Don't know.
not tell you.
Okay.
I think it's because of distance, because it's coming from the middle of the state. And I'm not sure, I don't want to get involved with how the medical flight teams are getting through with that, but that's not medically, there's no medical need for an ambulance transport.
I take it they can't just put down over at HSC?
Apparently not.
They have grass.
Any other questions for Steve? Dan, do you have any?
I would move to approve the proposed ambulance transport services agreement.
I'll second that, Clemish.
Motion and a second, further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
This is the back page. of that
Yep.
agreement.
Okay.
And when as I get them back, I'll get them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions for me? Yes, have a very nice evening.
You too.
All the canvassing?
Yeah.
Glad to have you back, Steve.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, item 7, Mike.
Hello. After going through, doing budget numbers for next year's budget, just looking at overall costs and everything, how they have been rising. It's kind of scary, I guess. Workload may go down in the future if things stay the way they are. I'm proposing to do some microsurfacing. We're already microsurfacing the county line with Clay County. I guess what I'm going after right now is to try to microsurface this 3 miles south out of Vollen and the 2 miles going west on Old 50. Just to finish up that corner of the county. It is in the plan. It was in the 5-year plan to chip seal south of Vollen all the way to New Highway 50. But I took that out, that 3 miles out, because I plan on putting that in the 5-year plan for next year. But I'm just looking at costs right now. We're gonna have to possibly start cutting things if we, I guess I'm looking at, do we possibly try to go over budget this year to save ourselves money next year? I have heard a couple other counties talking about it, don't know if they're doing it, about trying to plan extra projects this year because the way everything is going with the economy. We all know oil prices skyrocketing. Even talking to guys making the asphalt, you know, they're gonna stick to the bid price, but
And we had kind of talked about this. Essentially, we're looking at pulling this project in from next year and doing it this year, because it wouldn't necessarily increase labor to your department. This
Right.
is subbed out. And so the implication is it would put you over budget for this year.
How much over
But
budget?
we have about $4 to $5 million more so than we typically would. So the thought was if we spend that this year versus at an inflated cost next year.
Because we have a finite amount of time to spend it.
That's one reason, and it's likely to increase in cost next year. And so the thought is and I support this. I support spending as much planned work that we can this year at a probably reduced rate than what it would be next year due to inflation and costs. We talked with Mike about, workload, man hours, what can we feasibly do? And you're going to be stretched pretty thin as far as your crew this year. But things that are subbed out, I feel make sense to pull in this year if we can. And then they're going to be microsurfacing the county line this year. So that'd be there.
one instance, like next year, normally we've been trying to do at least 2 bridges a year. Well, next year, we're gonna have to cut it down to 1. Our $225,000 to $275,000 bridge just almost turned into a $400,000 bridge, with iron prices and everything else. So just for H-pile, for driving pile for the bridges, this year, 60,000, versus 30,000 in the past. It's double.
Mike, what roads are you planning on microsurfacing?
That'd be the 3 miles south of Vollen up to Old 50 and then back to the west, 2 miles of Old 50, where we left off with our paving that we did in 2020.
Okay, and can you explain to the citizens and why microsurfacing is a good option, please, for those people who might not know?
Well, it's less cost than paving. It's kind of it's a cheaper avenue. Its original purpose in life was wheel rut, to fix wheel rutting. They started doing it in Minnesota and it's kind of trickled its way here. Many ways, some of our roads that are in good enough shape to do it on, I feel this might have to be an option in the future that we have to start going towards.
So basically, it's like if you're woodworking, it's like a plane. It levels the road out, and so instead of having to do 3 or 4 inches of asphalt, you can get away with less. So it's a cost savings in the long run, correct?
Right.
Explain that cost savings with you for everybody so they can understand.
Well, right now, it'll be 55,000 a mile to do it this year. To do a leveling mat like we did on Old 50 back in 2020, we're spending about that 55,000. Now with the increase of asphalt prices and stuff, we're probably looking at, to do the same exact thing, we're probably gonna look at around that 80,000 per mile. And then plus that's done deal. Like when I say 55,000 a mile back in 2020, well, we're still putting wear and tear on equipment, fuel and all that stuff, you know.
Striping and everything. This
Right.
includes striping.
This
and-
includes striping. This is a done deal. We don't have to. No labor in it other than marking the road out for striping.
Thoughts?
Makes sense. Sadly.
I don't know, do you need a motion at all for this, or just more of a blessing?
I don't, because you're not spending anything yet,
Not spending anything yet, but.
but I think
In
when
his,
you
I think
do-
what he's saying is in his budget request that's coming.
Well,
next
no,
Friday.
it won't be into that budget request. It'll put him over for the 2022 budget.
Yeah, but
So,
I think when you get an actual bill or actual cost, then just agree that you agree to his request.
well, I don't have an issue with it. I support it. Don, you okay with moving that, pulling it in? Dan, you okay with pulling that in?
Yeah, did you have a total dollar amount? Because there's nothing in the packet on what he's gonna be spending extra.
Approximately 275,000. It'd be 55,000 a mile.
Okay, so how many miles additional are you planning on doing?
5.
Okay, so 5 additional miles. And so what is your estimated cost savings doing micro surfacing and then an overlay versus just doing an overlay?
Just to be clear though, it's not,
No.
it's not 5 additional miles. It would be
Sure.
Replacing, pulling it in a year.
Yeah,
It's scheduled to
exactly.
be done.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't
Okay.
have an overlay scheduled. It's not replacing overlay, but we're essentially pulling this project in a year.
So we're still, once this is micro surfaced, is it gonna have an overlay over top of it, or will it be completed once it's micro surfaced?
That will be completed.
Okay, and that'll offer a smoother ride. It's just basically, like you mentioned before, taking the bumps out of it, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, and Mike, I appreciate you looking into newer technologies like this, and, anytime we can save the taxpayer dollars and make it go farther, that's what we should be doing, so I appreciate you looking into these techniques. And we all know it's not gonna be cheaper next year to do.
Right?
Guessing not. Okay, thanks,
All right.
Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 8, West 11th Street draft. So at the last meeting, we had a draft. We had some discussion, collaboration and whatnot on it. There was a few changes proposed. Sherry put some of those changes into this new revision. And there are a couple questions she had kind of inked in there in blue. We should discuss, and then if anybody else has questions, comments, concerns, the goal here would be to have this to a finalized format this evening. We will not vote on it, but to a format where at the next meeting we can take action on it. So one thing that, I'll just go through some of the changes, I guess, the updates. Paragraph 2, what's kind of been updated is either 90% or greater of the parcels would participate. That would essentially impose the tax to 100% participation. And the question was, what if there's 50%, but they're willing to incur the entire cost themselves? And so there's either 90% or greater. Or if less than 90% of the parcels with residential or commercial structures within the improvement zone support the implementation on their properties to fund the cost for improvements, of which only those supporting parcels would be assessed. That makes sense to everybody.
My only, I think that's really good, Joe. My only thing is maybe we've also, but maybe this is something we got to add. We all agree on the improvement, but what about the maintenance? And I know the citizens, West 11th, they want to help out with the maintenance too. And I guess that's a decision that we probably have to make at the commission is, do we want to have maintenance for the first few years covered, or do we not? And that's a decision I think we're going to have to make.
Well, that maintenance is discussed in here.
Okay.
Gotta-
And maybe, and once we get that figured out, I was just saying, because it says, it basically talks just about the cost of the improvement. And maybe we would have improvement and maintenance, or discuss improvement in another paragraph, or maintenance in another paragraph was my question.
Seven.
Paragraph 8.
Seven
Isn't it?
on mine.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I show paragraph 8 on here. But so to address that, Dan, whereas South Dakota Codified Law 31-1351, 31-1352 allow for the Board of County Commissioners acting as Board of Supervisors under these statutes to levy an annual front foot assessment for maintenance and repairs of streets and surface. There's a question, Rob, you might have to weigh in. Do the statutes limit us from equally applying to properties and also extending it to properties not abutting the road?
I thought that the statute allowed you kind of like go down like a cul-de-sac or so many feet off. I'm pretty sure that's what it says. And it's also addressed in paragraph 7, which would be page 4. It also says it in there. It says we have to follow the rules.
Oh, I see what,
Yeah.
yours,
Maybe.
that 7, I was going on
You were
the
counting.
actual paragraph 7, where at, okay, I see what you're saying. I wasn't down that far yet.
Yeah, and 2, I'm pretty sure it's limited to $2 a linear foot, up to $2 a linear foot.
Yeah, I believe you're right on that. So I'm just trying to highlight some of the changes that were just, brought up at the last meeting. Just mostly for this discussion. Everything's on the table, obviously, to be discussed, but one of the things we talked about, the language, being careful with residential structures, commercial structures, houses, residences, et cetera. If it's a vacation home or it's an improved property, but it's not a primary residence or something. So that verbiage was cleaned up and looking for other changes. And then the last paragraph 9, there was a dissolution of agreement. So that gives it gives the county an out, and it also gives the citizens along the road an out down the road. And so the county commission may vote to revoke this agreement at any time and assume all responsibility for maintenance of the road identified in subsection 1. And then the other paragraph added there is owners of the parcels included in this assessment may exit this resolution if 90% or more are in favor of dissolving. Assuming the initial project costs have been satisfied through the assessment, that initial tax assessment. And then the maintenance becomes a question again, because now the county would be fully on the hook for future maintenance of a hard surface road. And so it states at that time, the Board of County Commission assume all responsibility for maintenance and of the road identified in subsection 1, cost and method of maintenance will be reassessed at the time of dissolution. So if the citizens along that road decided to, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, say, we don't want to be part of this anymore, the county will take on the maintenance. Whether it remains hard surfaced, what type of maintenance would be addressed at that time. Those were the main changes, I guess, that were discussed.
My one question too, is 8 sales of property. It says if property is sold, the assessment transfers. Well, what happens if it's just transferred and somebody, gives it, somebody passes away and somebody else inherits it? That's not really necessarily a sale.
It transfers with the property.
Oh, well, it says if the property's subject to the assessment is sold, the assessment transfers. And my question was,
I got your question. If it make you feel
Okay.
better, we could add or is otherwise transferred.
We could
yeah, I
change-
like that idea, Wanda. That sounds good.
That way it covers all your bases.
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, we can add that in there. Transfers is for all transfers.
Or is otherwise
And-
transferred.
Okay,
Now, do we need a motion on this?
no, this is, we just want to get this. So it's gonna be on the July 5th meeting, July
Yep.
5th. So on the July 5th meeting, we will take action. The intent was to have all questions cleared up at this meeting. And so July 5th, here's a finished document. Approve it, hopefully.
Are you letting the folks in the audience talk tonight if they want to?
I'm going to, yep. And I believe you received a copy of these changes, correct? Okay. So I think if the board has any more questions or not, Dan, do you have any more at this time?
No, I think a lot of good work and thought has been put in to the document. So it gives the citizens an option, for upgrading their roads.
Correct, yeah. So at this time, would any of the citizens like to come make a statement? Come on forward, Bob.
Would, on the maintenance, Bob Turshinsky, in the maintenance agreement going back, is it going to be a flat $150 a year for the maintenance fee for the property owners? Or I heard you mention something, so much a linear foot?
It can only be up to, so Bob, it has to stay under $2 a linear foot.
So it would be
It
up to
can't be over that.
$150 a year for maintenance.
Yep, it has to.
Okay, second question. If someone does develop one of the properties to the north, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
will those lots or property owners be taxed for, suppose the road's already there, they're taxed for 5 years still?
Not as this agreement's written. They would, if they developed next year, they would get in on 4 years, 3
So the
years,
road could
2
be
years.
finished, And they would just have to pay $150.
If the road's finished, then they just have the maintenance fees. That's correct.
I think everybody should have to pay $800 or $685, even if they're building a new house there, or they have, 5 or 10 lots there. Each one of them is sold. They pay 5 years on that road, even if it is there. So, because it's going to, it's not going to be fair to the people that started the whole thing and pay all that.
I don't disagree with
That
that.
might help you guys out too, the county out too, as far as.
And that was something that we kind of discussed. I don't think anybody had a good answer, because one of the other questions was there's several lots where there's a home with an empty lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was kind of the question that do we assess that tax onto both of their lots or just the one that's developed? And then what happens if they develop down the road and
Well, if you build another home on another empty lot, you shouldn't have to pay that 5-year period. Simple. I mean, it does bring some continuity to the whole thing. I mean, everybody pays $685 across the board. The road's there. You build a new house in there, you're going to pay $685 for 5 years. And that goes towards the maintenance or whatever you guys come up with it, but that goes towards the maintenance of that road or whatever. They could put 20 houses in there.
I believe, and don't quote me, but I believe where it becomes difficult is I don't know if there's a good avenue to assess that retro. And to have one,
Prospectively.
right, retrospectively, and then to have one, let's say you're 10 years down the road and that tax is gonna be assessed for the maintenance along that entire lane, and then to have, let's say, one parcel that's at a different assessment. I don't know if you can do that.
That's
So
something we can
anybody
look
that
at.
builds in there in the next 5 years, they would pay the regular stated costs there, but anybody that comes in there after 5 years,
After 5 years.
That's how it is
you
today.
guys aren't gonna make any money.
We never make any money, you know
I'm
that.
just trying to- I'm
The
just trying to
county's
even
not
the playing
supposed to
field.
No,
make
I
money.
know,
Even the playing
I know,
field here
I
for
know. And to
everybody.
be honest, we,
County concern and the property owner concern. So,
it is, and that was kind of part of that discussion of, assessing the ag properties, or when it does get rezoned, if it does to be developed, how does that get handled? And I don't know that there's an easy mechanism to do so. I know your point. I mean, I know what you're saying, and
well, it's just something that's, I think it should be addressed. It should be continuity, bring continuity to it all the way across the board.
right.
So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bob. Anybody else care to weigh in on this? Come on forward, please.
Chief Melky, what happens, is it possible that, okay, say 2 years from now that it's put in, can they be taxed for the last 3 years
Yes,
of 685?
yes.
Okay,
That's my understanding how this would work then, is that if they came in and that 5-year was still going, the remaining years on that portion, those parcels would join in on that.
okay, good. And then, there'll be tax for the maintenance and everything else.
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay,
Good to know.
we can look into the retroactive, but I don't know that there's a way, but we can certainly try to look into that before next meeting.
I think there has to be some, there has to be a legal aspect to saying. If you're going to build a lot out and then it's being developed. What you should expect.
You know, part of that, and I trust me, I don't disagree. Part of that is the way this is structured and, you know, kind of developed, and I know it was part, our suggestions, and it came partly from your group, but it's this initial assessment. If you like paragraph 4, there's 37 zone parcels having residential or commercial structures included. And so this is only going to apply to something that currently is an improved property with a commercial or residential structure. So those are the ones that are added in. Now, there are a couple that have, you know, raised their hand and said, yes, we would participate in this. That's still in the same paragraph.
Couldn't it be stated that any additional structures built? Should be considered in this 5-year plan, which is why the plan stands for anyone that constructs it.
I think the issue becomes the way
I don't think we can legislate everything into the future. What if
the way
somebody wants to put an apartment house out there that has, 36 apartments? Do they get taxed different or assessed different?
I think
I
what
can
it boils
understand
down
that.
to though is the legislation allows, I think the legislation allows in this codified law, they allow this assessment to be put on for road improvements. And once that's done, to come in and put that on a single parcel retroactively, you'd have to have a road improvement tied to that, I would imagine, and it would probably have to be along that entire path. I just don't know that it's the intention of how that was written. I don't know if it's necessarily used how we're using it. I think a lot of times it's intended for an entire development prior to the development. And then everybody along there would probably be, empty parcels, and everybody would probably pay in, would be my assumption. But right. No, and I know what you mean. It would either, I think the resolution would have to be every parcel regardless at the very beginning here would have to be on board with it or part of this, which would mean anybody owning multiple parcels would be paying twice. And
Correct that. Say, if there's a new road out there, 5 years, somebody wants to put a development, you don't have to pay anything at all.
correct, they would just have to pay that maintenance fee.
Or nobody could do it. We can leave the road the way it is.
Just reciprocity.
Yeah. Okay, for now, is there any more questions? And if not, we will,
Hey, Joe, I think that's
Yes.
something we can look into, because I thought the city kind of does something like that. where
okay,
They assessed, and then they assess the property, and if it's not paid, then I think it runs with the ground. That's what I think, but if we can look into it and see if that's an option.
okay,
I know it sounds like a hard option, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of guessing. And
Yeah.
Trying to determine how many lots are gonna be and assessing per lot. It'd be pretty difficult.
right.
It might be possible.
Well, warrants some investigation. We'll look at that and try to get information back to you before next meeting as well. And then as of now, this is what it will look like with the
Change in paragraph
change
9.
in sales or transfers. That'll be updated, but otherwise this is pretty darn close to where it'll end. So, okay. With that, we will move on to item 9, cell phone tower discussion. So in the packet, there should be a draft. Gary actually did the work on this draft, and we started talking, what, 2 years ago? We thank you. We started talking about potential changes to our tower ordinance, and part of it is what we have now is very cumbersome. It's very expensive to applicants. It's I think the last tower was what, a year or 2 years into the works before it actually comes into public comment time. And there's a review process by a consultant, and they go into reviewing, a lot of the tower, or not even the tower, but the antenna and the signal regulations and things that really we don't participate in, and quite frankly, don't have any jurisdiction or care, I guess. So we were talking that we essentially, as a county, are concerned with the size of tower, fall zones, things of that nature, and then where in the county they may be located. And so this was the very first stab at kind of reducing that down. I'm hoping to get just a little bit of feedback if that's the right direction, if we can reduce it more. If we reduced it too much, if we whittled too much away, but it's, oops, I got the wrong thing up. It's a first stab, I guess, at reducing it. I don't know. Gary, do you have anything you want to say on that? And I will take a little public comment on this.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest thing is to get rid of the consultant part of it and the cost and the 2 year to get through the process. Like we said, this is a first draft. A couple of other things that we may need to look at is one of the things that comes up fairly frequently is whether or not we want to require. Currently, we talk about any modification to a cell tower that we want people to come in for CUP. I don't know if that's something that, if they're just modifying or adding antennas, if that's something we still want to do down the line. But the biggest thing is to make the process quicker, less review, and get it through so that these, only when needed, that it would go for the existing stuff, especially. The new stuff will always go through the CUP process. Right. So.
And one thing that has been discussed, and I've talked with Eric Taylor, happens to be here because he's on the next line item, 2 more. But with Urshman Engineering, and one thought process is, do we kind of split this into macro and micro towers? The macro being your guide towers and your true large monstrosity towers versus your monopoles. Treat those as what more of a micro site. And
I guess, Joe, one concern I'd have, and Don, I don't know if you remember this or not, when we were on the planning commission, we did quite a few towers. It's been a number of years ago. I think part of the process and the reason for conditional use permits when they come back for existing towers was to, I hate to say force cooperation between companies. Instead of having multiple towers in one location, the conditional use process kind of outlined how co-locating was a better idea than having different cell towers. I don't know if it's still that way, but for a while, the tower companies wouldn't share with each other. And that's the reason that that was in the process, or so I was told. So,
Yeah, I'd agree, Dan. I think what Gary was alluding to is the ordinance, if you can believe it or not, says one thing and also says another. And I think that what he's referring to is if there's an existing tower and someone wants to swap antennas on that tower or add an antenna to said tower, that the tower already has the CUP, and can that just be allowed without going through the whole CUP process?
yep, I get what you're saying. Yep.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to add at this time?
Bill didn't told me 6:30, so then I wasn't expecting this, but this is fine. So my name is Eric Taylor. I'm with Urshman Engineering. I've worked in the tower industry for over 25 years. So I have a little bit of experience of what's been going on a little bit. So to start with a few things, starting with macro and micro. Reason why we are breaking it up in the industry a little bit is a micro can also be considered a small cell. So a similar type tower would be like at the high school, there's a tower behind there. There's about 3 of them on towards the lake. So they're just a very small, probably 30 to 50 foot tower, a few radios and a few antennas just to cover a certain spot. The main reason why the tower was put at the high school was because when the kids got out of school, they blew up the cell area with Verizon. And so that became a big issue. And so this is a way for them to offload some of that data and calls that are being used. So the rest of the people in the other part in what we call the macro sites can handle that other traffic. So that's where that does happen. Sioux Falls has what we call small cells, which we called the micro site, the smaller towers in downtown Sioux Falls where they have 5G. And that was done over about 3 years ago as a Verizon project, just to show how the newer technology can help in those areas to give better coverage and better service, but at higher speeds. Macro, the tower that's over by St. Ben's is a self-supporter. The one over by Trip Park Plaza is a monopole. There's the guide tower over by the wastewater treatment plant.
What's the one behind the old Slumberland?
That is a
Macro?
monopole. That's a macro.
Okay.
Okay. Macro is more, not going to be in your 30 to 50 foot height, but also they're going to have multiple antennas like the one Trip Park Plaza. That's why I think that's the name of that Verizon site. So there's basically 3 different types of towers. Guide towers are carriers would prefer it because they're a cheaper tower to make and to put up. Most places won't allow them because of zoning. The zoning people don't like looking at them. So it's very hard to get them up. So it's a very kind of a dying breed of a tower. Monopole takes up the least amount of space. Self-support is the next one. Most what we're seeing, so right now there's currently 4 different carriers in the United States. You've got Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and now Dish Network. We'll probably never see Dish Network for a long time. We're considered more of a tier 3 classification for that. So that's gonna be something that's gonna take some time. T-Mobile has antennas already in Yankton. They just haven't turned it on. And part of that was due to the Sprint license that was owned by the city of Brookings. Had the Sprint license from Brookings and Watertown all the way down to Sioux City. So I did think it covered this area, but T-Mobile did buy that company and bought those licenses. So they're taking their time. Right now, everybody is in a big push of augmenting their towers with adding more technology, more antennas, more radios. So as we talk about towers, I think the current, if I remember right, this has been a while, I think your current spec says it has to be good for 5 carriers, which is probably way too many. Right now in our market, we might have 3. You might want to leave a little bit on for broadband. There is $42.6 billion that are getting pushed out soon to each state is going to get partial of this money for broadband in rural areas. Some it's going to be wireless, some it's going to be fiber. It's going to be dependent a little bit upon the state and also what the federal government does. So that is being pushed already. The thing when we get back to fall zones can be specified where you want it to be. And what that basically means to an engineering company is if the tower is going to fall, what is the radius you're going to allow it to fall of its height? If you have a 100-foot monopole, if you say all zones 100 foot, then it can totally fall over and be okay. If you tell it's a 50-foot fall zone, the engineer then will design a weak point in that tower. So if it ever does fail, it's going to fall within that fall zone, and you can get a letter from the engineer from that. So you can, if you want, some places have it by schools where they want a shorter fall zone radius, then they can do that. They can specify that, but it needs to be specified ahead of time to make sure then you want to have the fall zone letter that's stamped by an engineer to show that it will meet that requirement. That's not uncommon. It's across the country. Everybody does. Nobody's uniform on what they do. Everybody does everything differently. So when you go into, just like Dan was mentioning, years ago, AT&T and Verizon bought their own towers and went on their own towers that would not share with each other. Many states, including North Dakota, there was a tower every mile apart from each other, all the way across North Dakota. They would never share. There's been a major change in tower ownership. Verizon still owns some towers, but most of them have gotten out of that, of owning the towers, and gone to American Tower, Crown, SBA, Vertical Bridge, or the big four, own probably 150,000 towers or more. That letting those guys be the tower owners, and so then they want people to co-locate on there. So that's becoming a lot more common. The capital intensity of buying a tower, doing the setup and everything else is quite high. So they'd rather, instead of spending the money on the site, they'll rather pay the rent and then install their equipment instead.
18 and 81 is a great example of where there should have been more co-location.
That happens, and that's how it used to be, but more of them, or.
Yeah.
And with the city, we used to have a separate company that had an agreement with them and to help kind of push co-location a little bit more onto, especially onto over by the wastewater treatment plant. There was quite a few carriers on that tower. And it was kind of pushed that way. So most of the time it's going to, depending on what kind of, where they're looking at going, what's the requirement that they're looking for to see if there's something that's available there. So you can always try to put in co-locate first before putting a new tower in, but there is what's happening with the newer technology, it doesn't travel as far. So the latest bands are the 3.7 and 3.9 that Verizon and AT&T spent $60 billion for, that they're going to be pushing out the next 3 years to try to compete with T-Mobile. And so they're going to be all adding antennas. They're currently going to be doing it in Sioux Falls and other markets. They're going to be adding more antennas and more radios to their existing towers currently. They may need modifications to the tower so they can hold those towers. The structural analysis may show that. But you know, you guys can start with, if you want to say you need to find a co-location spot first, if they can within their search ring, you know, that's something you can take a look at. But most likely everybody's going to be, I think the AT&T tower just north of St. Ben's was redone 3 years ago. And so was the one over by Gable, because part of our company did that work of adding some more technology to it. And now there's more technology that has to be added to it. The newer technology will be good for about 3 to 4 miles compared to 6 or 7. But your phone is going to work better. It's more the 5th generation. That's the big push.
So I think the main, in our discussion that started this 2 years, 3 years ago, you know, we talked about what is important in our ordinance and kind of the fall zones, trying to push co-location, things like that were important. What our 20-some, 30-some page ordinance just for that article today has is, you know, the consultant reviewed engineering drawings that were already signed off by a professional engineer. I thought that was not unnecessary, I guess. They go through signals and FAA regulations and things of that nature. So I think it can be pared down. I think it can make it easier for planning and zoning to understand, for us to understand, for tower builders to know exactly what they're getting into. And I'm not saying we want to gut this and say you can put towers anywhere you want. That's not at all what I'm saying. I think we can have a more pointed focus on what we want to do, where we want to see them, and clean up the rest of it. And, as Eric had said, there's a lot of money coming to the states for rural development. And I think it would be beneficial to Yankton County to get in front of this and make it work for everybody as much as we can.
And then one thing to understand with tower owners want to spend the least amount of money as possible in regards to the type of tower and everything else. So depending on where it is and everything else, I've seen it as much bad as in California for a railroad company, which is amazing that they made him do it. They made him put up a pine tree and bark the whole thing all the way up to 90 feet, which was way beyond what it needs to be. But there are other alternatives or different things that can be done besides, at least cheapest is going to be a guide tower, then self-supporter, then monopole, but then you can have them painted, they can have done some different concealments or different things, so they look a little differently just depending on where he is going. So it just kind of really depends on zoning dictates to the carriers what they have to do, or to the tower owners what they have to do. That's usually what drives everything on the type of tower and everything else, requirements that they have to work with.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too, and I didn't necessarily realize until the last tower that we had approved, we have very little say in where towers can go to start with. The federal government kind of rules in that, and if a tower company says we need service in this area and this is the location, that's kind of it. There's some wiggle room, but that's, by the time it came to us in the last tower that was approved, by the time it came to planning and zoning to the commission, there was almost no say in yes or no. It was, well, this has already been approved by the consultant, and the company's been working on this for 2 to 3 years, and see in court if it's not approved. So just go clean all that up.
Since I worked in the concealment department out there, so you have little say on that, but can the county say we want, if it's in the lake area, it has to be concealed?
Yes.
Okay.
So those are the things that I think we need to focus on, not re-reviewing a professional engineer stamped drawing, that's just, but yes, those are the types of things we want to talk about in our ordinance.
When you say concealed, do you mean the ones that look like pine trees?
Some like that. I have some that look like flagpoles. There's other things that are in Sioux Falls, like crosses and multiple different things. I know. Palm trees, but they're still native. Yeah, they are. The lake has been the biggest pushback area for a tower anywhere. And they need to somewhat understand a little bit that, if you want your service and you need it, that it needs to be around. However, especially when you got gullies or areas, the signal isn't going to get into certain areas unless that tower is close by. However, the other thing too is, because I know it's trying to get our training tower at our facility, same time as they try to get the 140 foot, I think, monopole by the lake for AT&T, and that did not go over well. And that was just one of those things they had a lot of opposition to, but it almost needed to be a part of working with the site acquisition company, who's going to be the company looking for those tower sites, because they get a search ring. They have a certain area where that will work, and they use a propagation map looking at if they had certain frequencies, looking at density of trees and put vegetation around there, how that signal is going to work. So they have an area that they can work with, but it's almost where you need to sit down with your zoning people and say, here are some options, and kind of starting that process a little bit, and also trying to find out, is there something, if it was getting away from private carriers, because that makes it a bigger tower to start with, taller and wider, can we make it a little bit shorter, a few different things that maybe make it more appealing to people to have everybody wants a lake view, and when they get something that disrupts it, it really out there is, for a long time, it's been a big issue.
Well, I think our current ordinance constrains people and companies into this box. And so then they meet all of this and they don't have, the site acquisition is already determined before it gets to public discussion. And then it's like, well, it's too late. We already spent all our efforts into this. So I guess my thought or the goal would be to try to get some of this in the forefront and, you know, focus on things that actually matter and get the rest of the garbage out. So I don't think.
And all tower designs are PE stamped. Right. Pretty much a requirement. So we have two professional engineers on staff ourselves. But yeah, all the designs have to be PE stamped, even modifications to tower needs to be.
So if that sounds like a good direction,
I do have a question with section 2506.
okay,
Subparagraph 1 says that shall pay fines as set forth below. And then it doesn't have any fines set forth below.
which is not surprising.
It's in the packet.
Oh, in this one.
Yeah.
Yep, and Gary actually sent an email on that today. Noticing that could be use some attention. So this, like I say, this was
Just a draft.
a draft that Gary had kind of taken our ordinance and we went through what we felt the county really had say in and what we should do and kind of pared it down, and it was a starting point. But I just wanted to kind of get this in front of everybody, get a little bit of feedback, and then, you know, go running with that and get something that we can get to planning and zoning soon.
The one other comment that I was gonna make, the consultant that you hired, they went to a lot of other counties and did the exact same thing, which really pushed things behind a little bit. But my suggestion for that consultant would be not necessarily to review applications or anything that way, but be as an advisor if needed, if you get into any type of court situation, because they're gonna be more well-versed on the rules and laws.
Right.
And be needing them for that time if it gets beyond having to get pushed more towards a legal issue.
Yep.
Having them as for that support only.
Right.
On that part, because once it's, you know, everything's, you know, stand by your land surveyors and your professional engineers for the structural, you know, all that part's done. But if there's any issues, going back to the Telecom Act and everything else, then that's where you probably want them to be engaged.
Okay.
I'm not an expert on that. I don't know if you are or not, but it's hundreds of pages of.
Rob,
much.
you are.
Well, thank you, Joe.
So modest. So,
But it'd be, you know, a good resource for him to have if there's an issue that comes up.
right. Yeah, and I don't, I'm not saying we, you know, get rid of our consultant altogether. It's just some of how this was written. And actually the consultant we previously were using was not the company that basically drafted this.
Yeah.
He was kind of trying to help clean up some of this stuff too, so. But if, think we can move on from here, if that's all right. I might contact you for
Please do. And if
things
there's
here
any
and
time
there.
that
And
you guys want to sit down and get more information on the different types of towers and different things, I get photos of different things to show you and try to understand a little bit of technology as it keeps going and everything else, because again, there's a big push into rural broadband, fiber and wireless.
thank you.
Yep.
You didn't know you were gonna get pulled into that, did you?
Thank you.
Okay. With that, I would ask that we go into Board of Adjustment. Anyone?
I move that we go into Board of Adjustment.
Second.
Motion and a second, further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are now in Board of Adjustment. Item 10, Conkling CUP.
Hello, Bill Conkling for the record. I have a 40-acre farm just east of town. I put it up on the screen just for reference. This is the Budweiser warehouse east of 50. If you go 3/4 of a mile east and 1/4 mile south, that's my farm. You see the county road dead ends here and it splits off into a couple different little housing areas. So on my 40 acres, half of it I use for cropland. All this I keep for habitat. And 2 acres up on the top here, I like to grow specialty crops. And this year I'm trying something different. I'm gonna be growing flowers for cut flower sales. I plan on, you look skeptical.
Well, I just didn't know if that was the specialty crop you were thinking.
Well, I'm zone low density, so I can't do anything else like that. Anyway, I'm gonna cut a lot of them and take them to farmer's market, but there may be some instances where people want to come out and cut their own. And if I have them do that, because I'm low density residential, I have to have a conditional use permit for horticulture sales. I'm not gonna have a free for all. I don't really want a lot of people at my farm. I'm not gonna just say, come out, it'll be by appointment only. So, and I have all kinds of area for them to park. I don't see more than half a dozen vehicles at a time coming out. So it's not gonna be like a big, big scale project. It'll just be a few at a time. So basically that's my plan and what I wanna do. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
What township is that in?
That is Utica South, or Mission Hill South. Mission Hill South.
Do we need a motion?
We will need a motion. I will, prior to that, we're also gonna take public comment. So if there's no questions from the board, I'll open this up for public comment at this point. Would anybody in the audience care to speak on this application? Hearing and seeing none, public comment is closed. I'll bring it back to the board for motion. I will quickly go through the findings of fact from the planning and zoning meeting. Conditional use is being requested for horticultural sales in a low density residential district per Article 607. Mailings went out, publishing was published in the paper. Public hearing was attended. It passed 7-0 at planning and zoning. Ingress and egress is present. There's off right-of-way parking present. No refuse required. Utilities are present. No screening and buffering additional is required. Signs or lighting are not being used at this point. It is in general compatibility with surrounding properties and will not adversely affect public interest. With that, I'd entertain a motion or further discussion or both.
I'd move to approve the conditional use permit for the sale of flowers.
I would second that motion.
Motion in a second to approve. Further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Wanda,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Dan? Dan? Dan?
How do you tell if he's there?
His line's still active on there.
All right, I'm here. I'm sorry. I had to step out for an awards banquet. I didn't hear the
Roll
Conditional
call
use.
vote.
We're on the Conkling CUP. Motion was made to approve based on findings of fact.
Dan?
Are you looked at, I would vote yes.
Joe?
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, Item 11, Hirschman conditional use permit. Taylor, come on forward again. Applicants requesting conditional use permit for manufacturing in a commercial district per Article 10, Section 1007. Said property is legally described as Tract B in the south half of the southwest quarter of Section 33, Township 94 North, Range 56 west of the 5th prime meridian, Yankton County, South Dakota. E911 address is 4400 West 31st Street, Yankton, South Dakota.
We're just asking for a CUP to be able to get our zoning approved for the whole facility, since we did get to commercial. Now we need it to get back from commercial into, I don't know if it's like commercial or is it industrial?
We just have commercial.
Commercial.
Yep.
So we're just trying to get everything to be exactly the same across the board. Because we just recently had to rezone part of the north land to make it compliant with the rest.
So that north parcel was rezoned to commercial. And now you just want a manufacturing CUP to cover both.
That's correct, because we were
Parcels.
grandfathered in previously on the lower parts. So since we have the other part, we want to make it conforming throughout.
Okay. Any questions from the commission at this time? Okay. You may sit down.
Looks pretty clear cut to me.
Yep. Okay, I'll open this up to public comment. Would anybody in the audience care to make public comment on this application? Hearing and seeing none, public comment is closed. Bring it back to the board for decision. And I will go through the findings of fact from the planning and zoning. Publishings were mailed out and published in paper. Applicant attended the hearing. Planning and zoning approved this 7-0. Ingress egress exists. Off right of way parking is present. Refuge is service areas present. Utilities present. No screening required. No signs required. No other yards or open spaces required. It is in general compatibility with surrounding properties and will not adversely affect public interest. That I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move approval of the conditional use permit request.
Zoning,
Pardon?
how did the zoning vote on that?
That was rezoned.
Oh, reason.
It was rezoned at a previous time. Motion to approve based on findings of fact with a second. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, Patty.
Dan,
Yes.
Wanda,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to go back into regular session.
So moved, Clemish.
Do we need a second?
We
I'll
do.
second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are now back in regular session. Okay. Item 12.
This is first reading to present comments and testimony regarding the proposed amendments to Yankton County Ordinance 2020 definitions, Article 5 Agricultural District, Article 6 Low Density Residential District, Article 7 Moderate Density Residential, Article 8 High Density Residential District, Article 10 Commercial District, Article 11 Lakeside Commercial District, Article 12 Rural Transitional District, Article 13 Planned Unit Development District, Article 15 Supplementary District Regulations, Article 17 Administrative Procedure and Enforcement, Article 19 Board of Adjustment, Article 21 Duties on Matters of Appeal, and Article 28 Subdivision Regulations.
Any questions or comments from the board? This time I'll open up to public hearing. Would anybody care to speak on these proposed changes? Hearing and seeing none, public comment is closed. We will reconvene this for second reading at July 5th meeting, Gary?
Yes.
At the July 5th meeting. Okay, item 13, appoint 2 drainage commissioners. I think then, sorry, June 21st, at the June 21st meeting, we'll have the second reading.
How many do we get to vote for? I don't know.
2.
I guess that makes it easy.
So yeah, we had 2 openings, David Healy and Kevin Kirschman. And they were the only 2 applicants to apply and to be appointed again, so.
I'd make a motion to appoint David Healy and Kevin Kirschman to the Drainage Commission. Is it for a 3-year term?
3-year terms, I believe. We have a motion to appoint David Healy and Kevin Kirschman to the Drainage Commission. Is there a second?
Second.
Ooh, Don got it.
And Joe, for further discussion, I'd just like to express my appreciation to Dave and Kevin for continuing to serve Yankton County. It's much appreciated.
Duly noted. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Uh,
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, item 14, approve amended consolidated Board of Equalization minutes for April 29th, 2022.
I would move to approve those minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second, further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Approve May 17th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second, further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 15, claims.
Move to approve the claims.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve, further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. May payroll.
Move approval.
Payroll.
Second.
Motion by Kettering, second by Fox to approve May payroll. Further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Unanticipated revenue.
I move to approve all unanticipated revenue.
Second.
I think we better have a motion for both,
For each, okay.
because they're going to 2 different departments.
Because why?
They're going to 2 different departments, highway and sheriff.
Okay. Then I would move to approve the unanticipated revenue for in the amount of $15,084.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to approve anticipated revenue in the amount of $15,084 to go to the sheriff's department. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. And I'd entertain a motion to approve the unanticipated revenue in the amount of $61,600.
From the sale of a piece of equipment. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are now in commissioner updates. Oops. Sorry, skipped one. Public comment. Would anybody in the audience care to make public comment at this time? Hearing and seeing none, public comment is closed. Now we're at commissioner updates.
Commissioner comments.
Yep.
I attended the District 3 planning at Mitchell. Nothing immensely different going on, but good update.
Wanda, make Don talking to his microphone.
I was talking to Joe. Thank you, Dan. I attended the District 3 planning meeting in Mitchell a week ago, and interesting discussion, not a real long meeting, but some good information on things that are coming down the pike.
I'm just gonna remind everybody, we've got a budget hearing on Friday, the 17th. Did we set the time for that? 9 o'clock?
10.
10 o'clock?
10
10.
o'clock.
10?
10.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what-
Okay. And then the 8 county meeting is the
15.
15th,
15th.
and that's usually starts what, 11:30 if you want to get there.
And then 12. is-
And
then
there is
12
where?
It'll be in Olivet, I believe.
Okay. Okay. Any other updates?
I attended the Stone Church pre-disaster mitigation meeting. It had pretty good attendance with, I think, over 40 people from that area showed up, and very positive thoughts about raising that road. It's going to be a long process, but it was good to gather public input on it.
Yeah, it sounds like that was well attended and good meeting. Anything else, Dan?
No appreciation for the county allowing for the Memorial Day celebration. That was a great success. So I'm glad that we can utilize our Veterans Memorial for projects like that.
Yep, good to hear. Before we go into executive session, do you want to call in, or are you going to drop out?
Yeah, I'm going to call in. I'm going to have to step away for a minute to accept an award, and then I will. Do you want me to call you, Joe?
There isn't much.
I'll just call your phone. If that'll work.
Okay. Rob says there's not much. He's just going to give a quick update. I can fill you in too.
Okay, that'll be
Gotta
fine then.
sneak away, so,
Thank you.
okay,
All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
you too. With that, I'd entertain a motion, go into executive session.
I would move to go into executive session.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are now in executive session.
I make a motion to come out of executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second, further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are, any of opposed? Motion passes. We are now out of executive session and back into regular session. No action will be taken as a result of executive session. Items for next meeting.
Now, just so I'm clear, what date is that? Because I was gonna almost show up on Tuesday night
Uh,
until Valley told me that that would be a bad idea.
yeah, you didn't want,
So it's gonna be the 21st of June, correct?
that sounds right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, don't skip the
Well,
budget.
no, I
meeting.
got the budget meeting in there. I went the nighttime meeting.
21st,
Okay.
okay. And we will have, second reading of the
Changes.
changes. I don't have anything off the top of my head for the next meeting. Okay. Okay, we haven't heard from them yet, so. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?